Hello, and welcome to episode 48 of the Wine Educate podcast, where we explore WSET education, study tips, and practical advice for wine enthusiasts and professionals. So it's Tuesday, and we're going to do our Taste This episode. It was my birthday this week. We had lots of bubbles, and it's been great fun. So I thought, well, let's just keep it going. We will continue on with this theme, and it gives you all a nice excuse to go out and buy some for the tasting. There are many different ways you can make a sparkling wine. The main thing that all the sparkling wine styles have in common is that they have bubbles. They've got some CO2 trapped in there by various different means. And today, we're just going to focus on two because I don't want to make this an hour and a half long podcast for you. I love talking about bubbles. I think it's a magical process. The first person who laid claim to stating that they created bubbles, that's controversial because old Dom Perignon said that he was the one that discovered this process of making wine with bubbles. But if you go down to the south of France, which I spent some time in, and go to the wine region of Limoux, and go throwing around your belief that Dom Perignon was the guy, oh boy, them's fighting words in Limoux. And they are not going to take it because they believe they were the first ones to create wines with bubbles. Anyway, that is a whole other podcast for another day, but I just thought I'd bring it up because interesting fun fact. So which ones are we talking about today? We're going to discuss the traditional method and Méthode ANCESTRALE, or Pétillant Nature, or as most people know it, Pét-Nat. Again, if you're rolling your eyes when I say Pét-Nat, I can sense it, but I want you to have an open mind. Pét-Nat is a style of wine that has been sort of put into the natural wine canon. I'm going to talk all about natural wine on another day. I teach a natural wine class here at the shop, and the title of it is Natural Wine, ! Because it is a controversial topic for whatever reason, but also I think really misunderstood. So I do want you to approach this exercise with an open mind, okay? Open mind. Also, if you're taking your WSET Level 3, this is part of the curriculum. You have to know how wines are made in the traditional method and also Méthode ANCESTRALE. So let's start with the traditional method. You're starting with a base wine. So the big thing about the traditional method is that you have two fermentations. Starting with your base wine, and the base wine is fermented to dryness, but the alcohol is going to be on the lower side. 10, 10.5, just a little lower because you're going to ferment it again, right? So that is going to increase the alcohol percentage. So your base wine alcohol percentage is on the lower side. You are then putting this base wine into a bottle. Now, not just any bottle. It has to be a bottle with thicker glass because the pressure is going to increase and we don't want it exploding. I think a wine cellar used to be quite a dramatic place to be until they figured out how thick the glass had to be. You were essentially creating little bombs, and when the pressure increased to a certain amount, it would be too much for the glass and it would shatter and be quite dangerous, actually. Anyway, they figured that out. Glass thickness. But then you're going to be adding a little bit more sugar and a little bit more yeast because you need to kick off a second fermentation. And you're going to be closing up the bottle with a crown cap. So think about like if you're opening a beer and you need to open the beer and the thing flies off, that's what we're talking about. Crown cap. Then you're going to take your bottle and you're going to rest it somewhere for a while because the fermentation needs to happen. But something else magical is also happening, and that is when the yeast eats the sugar, it creates alcohol and the CO2, But then after a while, the yeast is going to die. There's no more sugar for it to eat. It dies, and it'll fall to the bottom of the bottle. And now we call it lees. I mean, lees is essentially like yeast zombies, but they do magical things for the wine. Two main things. They increase the mouthfeel of the wine, giving it like a creamier, slightly fuller texture. And they also add in certain aromas and flavors that remind you of the pastry shop. So you walk into the pastry shop, you see the croissant, the brioche, maybe the lemon tart. All of those aromas and flavors are created from these lees having contact with the wine. Now, depending on the laws and depending on the winemaker's decision, the lees will sit on the wine in the bottle for a certain amount of time. In champagne, it's at least a year. For other sparkling wines in France, it's at least 9 months. It depends on the rules of the appellation. But at some point, they're going to deem it time to disgorge. The main reason you're disgorging is to get out the yeast zombies, okay? So how are we doing this? If you're doing it manually in a process called riddling, this was the traditional way of doing it, which is tiring and time-consuming, and you have to hire someone. There's now a more modern way to do it involving something called a gyro pallet. And if you've ever seen these things in action, it's like something out of the Terminator. They all move at the same time in the same way, and it's really impressive to watch. Both the gyro pallets and riddling, you're trying to achieve the same result. You are moving the lees carefully down to the bottom of the neck so that you can then remove them. Disgorging is still sometimes done by hand, but again, this is very time-consuming, and you really have to know what you're doing to do it properly so you don't lose too much wine. It is mainly done now by machine, in dipping the neck of the bottle into a solution that freezes the lees and makes like a lees popsicle. So when you open up the crown cap, the lees popsicle will escape, and then you can quickly add in the dosage and put in the cork. Oh, has to happen pretty fast, right? You don't want to lose those bubbles. So what's the dosage all about? In the lees popsicle, you definitely lost some of the wine, so you need to fill some of the wine back up. But also, this is the winemaker's chance to add sweetness levels or even make a rosé by adding a little red wine. Nowhere else in the European Union can you add red wine to a white wine to make a rosé except for in champagne. Okay, you've added your cork, and now you have your traditional method sparkling wine. Where do we find these? Well, champagne. And it has to be from Champagne in order to be called champagne, or the lawyers will come after you. But also in France, they have Crémants, also made in traditional method. You have Cava, and many places in the US. England is making sparkling wine. All of these are made in the traditional method. All right, so now let's think about the ancestral method, or Pét-Nat. So the big difference here is that you don't have two fermentations. You have one continuous fermentation. You are fermenting the wine. The wine is maybe not quite done, has a little residual sugar left, and you're now going to put it in the bottle, put on the crown cap. So you're not adding any more yeast or sugar. It is one continuous fermentation. And one of the big misconceptions about this style of wine is that it's new, but it is not new. It has been around for a very long time, in particular in areas like the Loire Valley. And the second fermentation, I believe, initially was a bit of a mistake. Like most of these things is how we discover it. So you can imagine you're a winemaker in the Loire, and it can get cold in the winter in the Loire, and you've made your wine. The fermentation is seemingly stopped. You've put it into the bottle. It's in the cave in the cellar resting on its side. And then spring comes along and warms things up. You open up the doors to the cellar warms up. Oh, but guess what? There was still some yeast in the bottle, and there was still some sugar. So the yeast has woken up again and is going to eat that sugar. So now you have a slightly sparkling wine, the Pét-Nat. So the Pét-Nat can be dry or sweet. The bubbles are going to be less bubbly than the traditional method. And you're going to have sediment. Don't be scared of the sediment. Think of it as like your vitamins, your Scooby snacks. The Italians call it fondo and use it to make the risotto with. Oh, okay. So maybe you could try that too. I will say that there are wines made in the ANCESTRALE method that are disgorged. So some Pét-Nats are star bright and don't have any fondo in it. All right, so now that we have talked about the two different styles, I want you to go out and buy one. You do not have to spend all the money on a champagne. You can get a lovely Cava or Crémant from France and not have to spend an arm and a leg on that. When you buy your Pét-Nat from your local friendly bottle shop, ask them if they have one that's disgorged, because that might be fun to try. So maybe you could try both, one that had been disgorged and one with all the fondo floating around in it. How to serve a Pét-Nat. All right, this one is wacky to me. Because it has all that fondo in it, some winemakers, and this comes from the winemaker, so to me, very credible, of course, they're the ones who made it, they want you to snow globe it. And what I mean by that is mix up the sediment within the wine before you try it. I'm going to say this is a personal choice thing. So maybe you could try to snow globe your Pét-Nat, maybe not. But it's something to talk about, right? Because these two wines, I want you to taste them with your group, discuss the different winemaking, talk about your likes and dislikes, and what foods you would serve the wines with. And maybe make a risotto. I don't know, use that fondo. These are two very fun styles of sparkling wines. Obviously, there's other ones, right? Oh, I didn't forget you Prosecco and Asti and Tank Method. And they also make sparkling wines by injecting in the CO2. All sorts. But just doing two will help you really cement and learn about these two styles and help you with your studies. And then you can fill the gaps in with the other styles at a later time. All right, if you are not already on the newsletter, this is where I'm going to give the document that says how you should set up this tasting. I'll give you suggestions on what to buy and also questions that you can use within your tasting group, prompts to get the old conversation going. So go to wineeducate.com and you'll see the green button that says newsletter sign up, and you can sign up. Also, I have released the 2026 trips, and they are posted in the newsletter as well. All right, friends, I will see you on Thursday.